My name is Clara. I'm a twin. For those who aren't twins, let me tell you, the bond is intense. It's a shared breath, a mirrored soul. My twin, Eliza, and I were inseparable. We shared everything: clothes, secrets, dreams. At least, I thought we did. Eliza was always the more rebellious one, the one who craved the spotlight. I was the steady, quiet one, the planner. We were identical in appearance, but opposites in ambition. This contrast, I would eventually learn, was the foundation of the most spectacular, soul-crushing betrayal imaginable. I met Julian during my final year of college. He was everything I wasn't: confident, successful, and radiated a warmth that grounded my anxiety. Our relationship was a whirlwind, the kind of perfect romance that felt like a movie script. 3 years later, Julian proposed on a Venetian bridge, and I said yes. He was my anchor, my future. Eliza was thrilled, at least outwardly. She was my maid of honor, my constant companion during the frantic wedding preparations. She'd always joke, "If anything happens to you, I'll step in." Julian would never know the difference. We'd laugh, sharing that twin humor, never imagining the chilling prophecy in her words. Our wedding day 7 years ago was supposed to be the best day of my life, but it was strangely marred by an unexplained panic attack. The morning was a blur of hairspray and silk. I was alone in the bridal suite, just hours before the ceremony. The anxiety was crippling, a sense of dread I couldn't shake. Eliza found me hyperventilating, struggling to breathe. "Clara, look at me," she demanded, holding my face. "It's just nerves. You're dehydrated. You need to calm down." She handed me a glass of water. "Drink this slowly, deep breaths." The water was sweet, almost syrupy. Within minutes, the room started to spin. My limbs felt heavy. My thoughts drifted, slow and sluggish. I remember Eliza's face blurring, her voice sounding distant as she adjusted my veil. "It's okay, sister. Just rest. I'll take care of everything." Then, nothing. Blackness. I woke up hours later, groggy and disoriented, in a spare room at the venue. It was quiet. Too quiet. I checked my phone. It was 10 p.m. The wedding reception should have been winding down. I rushed out, found a venue coordinator, and was met with shocked silence. "Mrs. Thorne?" the coordinator whispered. "The party ended hours ago. You and Mr. Thorne left for your flight to the Maldives immediately after the final dance." My heart hammered against my ribs. No, I just woke up. There must be a mistake. I went hysterical. I called Julian's phone. No answer. I called my parents. They sounded relieved. "Clara, dear, you're fine. You must have just woken up from the flight. Have fun on your honeymoon." They thought I was Julian's wife, already on a plane. The person who had flown to the Maldives was Eliza, wearing my dress, carrying my luggage, and sleeping next to Julian. I spent a terrifying week trying to convince everyone, my parents, the police, the travel agency, that I hadn't been on the flight. My twin sister had impersonated me, but no one believed me. They all insisted it was me. They had seen me at the ceremony. They had seen me kiss Julian. My sister was simply my maid of honor, they said. I knew the truth. Eliza had drugged me and stolen my life, but I had no proof. My identical twin had become my ghost. I couldn't stay. I vanished, leaving the country, changing my name and trying to build a new life in constant aching fear. My anchor, Julian, was lost to me, married to the one person who knew exactly how to dismantle my existence. 7 long, agonizing years passed. I found a semblance of peace, running a quiet bookstore in a small town. The pain of Julian's loss became a dull ache. something I lived with, knowing I could never go back. Then, last month, a package arrived at my bookstore. It was a large, heavy envelope with no return address. Inside, there was a single piece of paper, a newspaper clipping from my hometown, dated 7 years ago. It was the wedding announcement. Julian and Clara Thorne, say I do. And taped to the bottom of the clipping was a handwritten note. It was Eliza's handwriting. It's time to come home, sister. Julian is finally divorcing me, but not for you, for someone else. I need you to understand what happened. My mind reeled. Divorce? Julian was divorcing Eliza after 7 years of what I assumed was her perfect, stolen life, and she was asking me to come back? My heart, dormant for so long, began to beat with a desperate, familiar rhythm, the need for answers, the desperate hope of reclaiming Julian. I flew back. The journey felt like a descent into the past. I didn't contact Julian. I went straight to Eliza's apartment, a sleek, modern place she had bought with my life savings, or rather, the money Julian and I had planned to spend on our first home. She opened the door. 7 years had changed nothing in her face, yet everything in her eyes. The confidence was gone, replaced by a hollow, defeated look. "Clara?" she whispered, stepping back. "Why, Eliza?" I demanded, pushing past her. "Why did you steal my life? Why did you marry Julian?" She led me into the living room, pouring 2 glasses of water, her hands steady now. She looked directly into my eyes, her twin reflection. "I didn't steal your life, Clara," she confessed, her voice utterly devoid of emotion. "I took a bullet for you. I married Julian because I had to stop him from going to jail." Eliza's confession that she hadn't stolen my life out of jealousy, but to take a bullet, was an emotional whiplash. I stared at her, the woman who looked exactly like me, yet was a complete stranger after 7 years of living my dream. "What are you talking about, Eliza?" "What bullet?" Julian was an investment banker. He was stable, successful. He didn't have secrets that led to jail, I challenged. Eliza sighed, running a hand over her identical dark hair. "You only saw the charming, successful side, Clara. I saw the desperate side, the side that was about to lose everything." She began to recount the story, meticulously piecing together the true events leading up to our wedding day. "Do you remember the accident 6 weeks before the wedding? The drunk driver who hit you on the interstate?" she asked. I nodded. It had been terrifying. I was hospitalized for a week with a broken leg and severe concussion. "That wasn't a drunk driver, Clara," Eliza confessed, her voice dropping to a whisper. "That was Julian." I felt the blood drain from my face. "No, that's impossible. He visited me every day. He was devastated. The police confirmed the driver was a college student named Marcus." "The police report was fake," Eliza cut in. "Julian's financial troubles were deep. He was bleeding money from his firm in a failed side investment. He was panicking. On that night, he was driving recklessly, completely distracted. He hit your car, but he didn't realize it was you." Eliza explained that Julian, fearing the police involvement would expose his financial instability, which could trigger an audit from his firm, fled the scene immediately. When he realized he had hit the car of his own fiancé, he used his connections and a large cash payment to a desperate young college student, Marcus, to take the fall and assume the identity of the drunk driver. He covered up the whole thing, but he didn't count on one person, Eliza continued. Julian had been secretly borrowing money from a shadowy loan shark named Mr. Petroff. Petrov knew about Julian's debts and the hit and run. He had Julian completely over a barrel. Eliza revealed that a week before the wedding, Petrov paid her a visit. He didn't want the money back immediately. He wanted something far more valuable: leverage. Petrov had been watching Julian. He knew Julian needed to look stable to secure a massive, high-risk loan he was planning. Petrov told me that if Julian went through with the wedding, he would expose the hit and run after the honeymoon, ensuring Julian went to prison for manslaughter and insurance fraud. "But why tell you?" I asked, completely bewildered. "Because Petrov offered a counterdeal," Eliza said, her eyes vacant. "Petrov knew about us." The twins. He said if I, Eliza, married Julian, he would hold the evidence for 2 years. He wanted a Caldwell married to Julian. The Caldwell name carries weight in certain circles. He needed Julian to look stable for those 2 years while he executed a few of his own risky deals through Julian's firm. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with horrifying precision. Eliza, always the impulsive one, saw a way to save her sister and secure her own future. "He told me, Clara, that you would never be able to handle Julian's secrets. You would try to go to the police. You would ruin Julian and potentially involve the entire family in Petrov's criminal network. He gave me a choice. Marry Julian in your place, keep his secret, and ensure he stays out of jail long enough for Petrov's scheme to work, or watch Julian go to prison with the collateral damage falling on the entire family." I sat in stunned silence. The panic attack I'd had on my wedding morning, the drugged water. It wasn't just to steal my life, it was to execute a desperate, life-saving switch. "So you drugged me, walked down the aisle, married the man I loved, and lied to everyone for 7 years, just to keep a financial criminal and hit-and-run driver out of jail?" I asked, the rage finally bubbling up. "I protected you from Petrov, Clara," Eliza insisted, "and I protected Julian from himself. I played the role of the perfect wife, kept the house immaculate, and made sure Julian maintained his image. I bought you 7 years of safety, 7 years for the statute of limitations on the hit and run to pass, making the threat less immediate. But why confess now? Why send the clipping?" "It's over now, isn't it?" I stated, realizing the implications. "Julian is divorcing you. Petrov's leverage must be gone." "No, that's the point," Eliza whispered, looking truly afraid. "Julian isn't divorcing me because he realized the truth. He's divorcing me because he's met someone else, someone new, and she's threatening to expose Petrov's old network unless Julian leaves me. Julian is panicked, and Petrov is back in town." The danger was not gone. It had simply shifted. Eliza hadn't sent me a rescue note. She had sent me a warning. Julian was shedding the skin of the perfect husband, and the real enemy, the one who orchestrated the entire switch, was circling back. Eliza's confession meant that the 7 years I had lived in pain, believing my twin had stolen my happiness out of petty envy, were actually 7 years of being unknowingly protected from a dangerous criminal network. My heartbreak was an unintended consequence of her desperate heroism, but now the danger was imminent. Julian's divorce from Eliza was not an act of freedom. It was a desperate reaction to a fresh threat. "Who is she?" I asked, gripping the arms of the chair. "The new woman. Who is forcing his hand?" "Her name is Vivian," Eliza explained, her voice low. "She's a lawyer at his firm. Smart, ruthless, and Julian is obsessed. She started piecing together the old Petrov connections. She knows Julian's money problems. I think she wants him to leave me so she can gain control over his assets before the next scandal hits. And Petrov is back, Eliza repeated, her eyes wide with fear. He's consolidating his power. He contacted me last week. He said that since Julian is dissolving the Caldwell connection, the stability he demanded, he's going to collect on the initial debt, plus the cost of damage control. He threatened to expose Julian and me for the wedding swap and the cover-up if we don't pay him an astronomical sum immediately. The original deal, Eliza marrying Julian for 2 years of silence, had expired. Petrov was now using the wedding switch as his new leverage. If the swap became public, it would legally nullify the marriage, exposing Julian's financial dealings during that period to intense scrutiny and potentially leading to fraud charges. He wants Julian to pay him to keep the swap a secret, I summarized. Exactly. But Julian doesn't know I'm talking to you, Eliza said, looking over her shoulder. He thinks I'm just a desperate, soon-to-be ex-wife. He's trying to sell off properties discreetly to pay Petrov, but Vivian is watching his every move. We need proof, I stated, the planner in me taking over. Proof of Julian's original hit and run, proof of the payments to the fake driver, and most importantly, proof of his financial ties to Petrov. We need something that puts Petrov away so the blackmail stops for good. Eliza looked hesitant. Julian is paranoid. He never kept anything in the house. He keeps records somewhere, I insisted. A man as controlling as Julian doesn't rely solely on memory. He has to have a safe file for everything he's done. We spent the next day searching Eliza's apartment, the life that should have been mine. We found nothing. We then drove to the house Julian and I had bought, the house Eliza had lived in for 7 years. The house was cold, formal, and strangely unfamiliar. Julian had always been obsessed with having a clean, minimalist home office. I remembered a strange feature in that office, a heavy antique bookshelf that seemed too large for the space. The bookshelf, I pointed. It was our anniversary present from his parents, but Julian never liked antiques. Why keep it? Eliza shrugged. I always thought it was strange, too. It was bolted to the wall. We examined the bookshelf. It was indeed bolted. As I ran my hands along the heavy oak panels, I noticed something. A small, almost invisible seam in the wood behind the thickest column of books. We struggled, pushing the books aside. Finally, we found a small, recessed button hidden behind the molding. I pressed it. With a soft whir of machinery, the entire central column of the shelf slid forward, revealing a small built-in wall safe. Eliza gasped. He had a hidden safe all this time. I never knew. He wouldn't trust even you with his worst secrets, I murmured, staring at the cold steel door. Now, the combination. Julian used the same pattern for everything. The year of his first major financial success, 2008, followed by the day we first met. After a tense few moments, the lock clicked. Inside the safe, we found not jewels, but paper, neatly labeled files. Marcus A. Settlement. This file contained copies of Julian's wire transfers to Marcus, the supposed drunk driver, along with the signed affidavit from Marcus admitting to accepting the payment in exchange for taking the fall for the hit-and-run accident. Proof of the original crime. Petrov Ledger, 2018 to 2022. This was a spiral-bound notebook filled with Julian's meticulous handwriting. It detailed all the payments he made to Petrov, the favors he performed, such as passing insider trading tips, and chillingly the explicit instructions he received regarding the wedding swap. One entry read, "E confirmed the swap. Protocol 1 initiated. Petrov is satisfied with the Caldwell connection. Safety secured for 2 years. Vivian D. negotiations. A recent file containing email printouts. Julian was indeed being blackmailed by Vivian. She wasn't just after his money. She had found evidence of Julian's tax fraud and was threatening to expose him unless he agreed to transfer key assets to her before the divorce was finalized. The ledger was the smoking gun. It detailed not only the swap, but also the long-term, systematic financial crimes Julian had committed with Petrov's protection. The real power lay not in the swap itself, but in the crimes it was designed to conceal. "We don't need to save Julian anymore," I declared, holding the Petrov ledger. "We need to use this to destroy the threat. We take Julian down, and Petrov loses his most valuable asset." Eliza looked at me, a flicker of her old defiant spirit returning. "So, what's the plan, Clara? How do we use the identity I stole to save the life you lost?" "Julian is selling assets to pay off Petrov," I said, a cold resolve settling over me. "We stop the final sale. We use his own paranoia against him." The Petrov ledger was our weapon, but we needed to use it publicly and immediately. Julian was liquidating his last major unencumbered asset, a vast, expensive piece of land he owned jointly with a shell company, to make the final payoff to Petrov and appease Vivian's demands. The closing was set for the next day. "Julian is meeting his lawyers at the firm's headquarters at 10 a.m. for the final contract signing," Eliza explained, pacing the floor of the secret office. "Vivian will be there. Petrov's proxies will be watching." "We can't rely on the police," I said, flipping through the ledger. "Petrov's influence runs deep. We need to create an irreversible public spectacle that exposes Julian's actions and forces the financial firm's hand before Petrov can intervene." The plan we devised was risky, relying entirely on the fact that Julian was married to Eliza, but the world believed he was married to me. "I need to become Eliza," I told her, "the desperate, emotional, soon-to-be ex-wife. And you need to become Clara, the sister who disappeared." The transformation was immediate. We traded clothes, jewelry, and most importantly, our entire history. Eliza coached me on the subtle mannerisms she had adopted over 7 years of being Clara Thorne. The way she always drank coffee, the small, habitual twitch in her left eye when she was nervous, the precise tone of voice she used with Julian's assistant. I practiced in the mirror, watching my reflection transform into the person who had lived my life. It was dizzying, a total erasure of my identity for a final, crucial act. The morning of the signing, I drove to Julian's firm as Eliza. I wore a tailored black suit, the perfect image of a calculating, slightly unhinged spouse fighting for her piece of the pie. Eliza, meanwhile, drove to the local courthouse, ready to file the real injunction. I entered the firm's headquarters. The tension was palpable. Julian's assistant intercepted me, her face pale. "Mrs. Thorne, I mean Eliza," she corrected herself nervously. "Mr. Thorne said you weren't to be disturbed until after the closing." "Tell Julian that the terms have changed," I said, using Eliza's low, cold tone. "I've discovered something about the true valuation of that land, and I'm not signing until I see the updated figures." I marched straight into the executive conference room. Julian, Vivian, and a battery of lawyers were gathered around a massive mahogany table. Julian's eyes widened when he saw me, Eliza, interrupting the most critical moment of his life. "Eliza!" "What the hell are you doing?" Julian hissed, rising to his feet. Vivian, cool and composed, stepped in front of him. "Mrs. Thorne, we are in the middle of a highly confidential transaction. Any interference now will be viewed as corporate obstruction." "Interference," I countered, my eyes fixed on Julian. "I am the legal wife. I am a co-owner of this asset, and I am simply protecting our mutual financial interest from a criminal." Julian's face went white. "Get out, Eliza!" "Now!" I slammed the Petrov ledger onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud, the title Petrov Ledger facing Julian. "This is what I found in the secret safe, Julian," I said, using the exact phrasing Eliza had used on him countless times in their arguments. "The ledger that details every single payment you've made to Mr. Petrov over the last 4 years, including the kickbacks, the insider trading, and the massive tax fraud you used to fund your fake lifestyle." Julian lunged forward, trying to grab the book. I snatched it back, holding it out of reach. "The real crime isn't the tax fraud, Julian," I continued, speaking loudly enough for the lawyers and Vivian to hear. "It's the fact that you used your wife, your loving wife, Clara, as collateral for your deal with Petrov." I paused, looking him dead in the eye, performing the role of the desperate, betrayed wife. "I know everything, Julian. I know about the hit and run and the payments to Marcus. And I know you only married me to save yourself from prison, not because you loved me. You were forced to marry me by Petrov. And now that you're divorcing me for Vivian, you're trying to disappear with the rest of the money." The conference room exploded into chaos. The lawyers were scrambling, frantically looking for their copies of the asset titles. Vivian, the ruthless lawyer, stared at Julian with pure venom. She realized her future husband was a dead man walking legally and professionally. Julian, seeing his life crumble around him, did the only thing a cornered man could do. He confessed. But he confessed the wrong thing. "It was all Eliza's fault," he screamed, pointing at me, his supposed wife. "She forced the swap. She blackmailed me into marrying her because she wanted the Caldwell name and the money. She drugged Clara and took her place. She's the fraud, not me." The room went silent again. The lawyers exchanged horrified glances. The cheating wife had just claimed she was an imposter. "Is this true, Julian?" Vivian asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Did you marry the wrong sister?" Before Julian could retract the panicked truth, my real twin, Eliza, walked into the room. She was wearing a simple dark dress and holding a manila envelope. She was my ghost, now fully materialized. Eliza walked right up to the table. She looked at Julian, then at me, her double, and then at the shocked faces around the room. "Yes, it's true," Eliza said, her voice clear and resonant. "He married me, Eliza, not my sister, Clara. And he did it to save himself from a criminal investigation. But he didn't do it out of love. He did it because Petrov demanded a Caldwell bride. And I did it to keep him from going to jail for running over my sister." She placed the manila envelope on the table. "This is the annulment petition for the fraudulent marriage. And this is the full package of evidence detailing Julian's financial crimes, the hit and run, and the blackmail. It has been delivered to the proper authorities." Julian was utterly defeated. He was exposed by 2 identical women, one of whom he thought he had controlled for 7 years, and the other he thought he had banished forever. The ensuing scene in the executive conference room was one of utter pandemonium. Julian was arrested right there at the mahogany table, not just for tax fraud and embezzlement, but for obstruction of justice and the cover-up of a hit-and-run. Vivian, the opportunistic lawyer, instantly became the chief witness against him to save her own career. Eliza and I walked out of the firm's headquarters together, leaving the wreckage of Julian's life behind. Stepping onto the sidewalk, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, the weight of my stolen identity, the weight of my lost love, and the weight of the years of agonizing confusion. "It's over," I whispered, looking at Eliza. "You saved my life 7 years ago, Eliza. But you kept me a prisoner in the process." Eliza looked tired, defeated, but finally relieved. "I know, Clara. I'm sorry. The guilt, living your life, sleeping next to the man you loved, knowing the truth. It was a living hell. But every time I thought about confessing, I remembered what Petrov threatened." We drove back to the house that was no longer anyone's home. The marriage was legally annulled almost immediately, based on the fraud of identity and coercion. The house and assets were frozen pending the criminal investigation. Julian's immediate collapse served its purpose. It created a massive, simple legal scandal that completely overshadowed the complex, years-old problem of the wedding swap. Petrov, seeing his most valuable asset destroyed and his ledger in the hands of the authorities, disappeared completely, his criminal enterprise severed from the legitimate financial world. The financial cost was huge. The Caldwell family was disgraced. But I had my name back, and I had my twin sister back. However, the consequences of the swap were not entirely clean. My 7 years of running had left me rootless. Eliza's 7 years of playing Clara had made her emotionally scarred and legally entangled. "What about you, Eliza?" I asked one afternoon as we sorted through the remnants of her life, the life she stole from me. "You committed fraud, deception, and you were complicit in concealing a crime." Eliza shook her head. "I already paid the price, Clara. I lived the lie. But legally." Julian confessed that I blackmailed him into the swap. He threw me under the bus to save himself. When the police interviewed me, I told them the truth, that Julian was coerced by Petrov, and I stepped in to protect you from Petrov's network. With Julian's full confession about the financial crimes and his hit-and-run, the authorities were more interested in the criminal network than the identity swap. The legal system focused on the $4.5 million theft and the hit-and-run cover-up, not the complicated romantic deception. Eliza was given immunity in exchange for her testimony against Julian and for providing details about Petrov's dealings. She would walk free, but forever marked by the shame of the twin swap. As for Julian, he faced a long prison sentence. He had destroyed his own life, but in his pathetic final moments of confession, he had freed me from the legal and emotional ambiguity that had haunted me for 7 years. The true resolution wasn't in getting back the wedding or the honeymoon. It was the final, devastating truth about Julian. He was never the perfect anchor I thought he was. He was a desperate, self-serving criminal who was saved by a loan shark and protected by my twin sister. Eliza and I decided to sell everything and divide the modest, legitimate assets remaining. We moved to different cities. The bond between twins was permanently altered. It was now a bond forged in shared trauma, guilt, and a mutual understanding of sacrifice. We could never be as close as we were before, but we were no longer enemies. I finally returned to my original name, Clara. I reopened my original design business. I started dating again, carefully, slowly. I realized that my real life hadn't ended on my wedding day. It had simply been put on hold by a complex act of betrayal and love. The most shocking confession wasn't Eliza admitting she married Julian. It was the realization that the life I had been so desperate to reclaim was a golden prison built on crime, and that my twin sister's terrible sacrifice, while brutal, had ultimately saved me from a criminal future. I had lost a fiancé, but I had gained my freedom, and that was a price worth the 7 years of waiting. Thank you for listening to this difficult confession. We are so grateful to share these stories with you. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments section below.